Hi all, in this video I want to look at variations of the Sicilian in particular and what they're named. So after e4, black plays the Sicilian defence. So what are the names of different ways of playing Sicilian for both white and black? As white, the usual move is knight f3, but knight c3 is the start of the closed Sicilian, and usually white's playing for moves like g3 and bishop g2 later and d3. For example, knight c6, and now bishop g2, and now maybe knight ge2. And white's plan is later to play castles and f4 and perhaps h3 and g4. So that's the closed Sicilian. There's also the Morris-Smith gambit with d4 takes, and then white gambits the pawn, so that's a Morris-Smith gambit. So that can be quite dangerous for the unprepared black player. So let's see, after c5, what else is there? b3 followed by bishop b2 is called the Snyder variation. g3 can transpose into the closed Sicilian, especially if white plays knight c3 later. b4 is an unusual move, a wing gambit, so sacking the pawn for very fast, like Benko gambit like compensation, fast development, dangerous bishops. So the wing gambit. Knight a3 is a crazy move, but it's being played by one GM apparently. Bishop c4 is popular among club players that think it's like a king's pawn opening. Black's best is probably to play e6, and if they carry on like stereotypically, just to play for a quick d5. Maybe knight c6 first to stop e5, and now knight f6, and now d5, and black should be quite equal already with that gain of tempo. So bishop c4 isn't very good. So it's played at club level a lot though. So after c5, the usual move which most GMs are currently playing is knight f3. So we're heading into open Sicilian territory because we have this exchange of pawns in the centre leading to a more open field to the position, more open lines, more tactical. So this is the usual move after knight f6 to attack that e-pawn. And after knight c3, we have the Najdorf variation with a6. We have the classical variation with knight c6. The Scheveningen variation with e6 because of this Scheveningen little pawn centre here. The dragon variation with that dragon pawn structure and the fire-breathing dragon bishop on g7. White often castles queenside, and it's a very violent, exciting games, but you need to know your theory for the dragon. Now let's go backwards then. After knight f3, what other alternatives for black were there? So knight c6 is another alternative, and after d4, c takes, knight takes, we now have the Sveshnikov variation is knight f6, and after knight c3 to play e5. But let's go back now. After knight f6, instead of knight f6, the accelerated dragon, let's try and get it to name it, accelerated dragon with g6, or the Kalashnikov is with e5. Also known as the Bourdonnais-Lowenthal variation because it was played in that game a long time ago. But the modern Sveshnikov needs knight f6 first. I mentioned that because I thought I was playing the Sveshnikov when I was actually playing the Kalashnikov. So there's some move order importance here. So after knight takes d4, knight c6, knight f3. Let's go back now. Knight f3, e6 now. Let's have a look at this. So after d4 here, c takes, knight takes, we have some more naming variations. Knight c6 is the Taimanov variation. a6 is called the Can variation. There's a four knights variation, believe it or not, called after knight f6, knight c3, and black plays the knight, so you've got the four knights out. four knights variation. Now let's rewind and go back to see some other variations. Knight f3. Now say black played d6 and white doesn't play d4. There's alternatives. Bishop b5 check, so the Kanal-Sokolsky attack, or the Nimzovich-Rosalimo variation. Now knight c6 is what I used to play, but I'm also put off by this move, which is the Rosalimo attack, or the Anti-Sveshnikov variation, where white's just content to double pawns and stop black having a fun game, and it changes the whole nature of the position. White might play, after doubling, pawns d3 and knight c3 and bishop e3, and it's a whole different game complex. On e6, white might not play d4, white might play d3, so there's lots of alternatives here. And here there's, black doesn't have to play either knight c6 or e6, could play a6, that's an interesting move. Or maybe g6, in fact. So that's the Hungarian hyper-accelerated dragon. So there you go. That's a very, very brief overview of many Sicilian named variations. And I hope to do some other videos looking at, say, the Caro-Kann or the French defence next. So yeah, I hope you picked up some interesting named variations there, which you didn't know before. Thanks very much, and see you on YouTube.